a gang doesn't have to be a criminal organization. What's a chain gang? A chain gang is a group of individuals who work in whatever field of business that they're in. It doesn't have to be a prison chain gang. Chain gang is a group of people who were originally connected to a chain. But that doesn't have to be a literal chain. It could be a figurative chain, like a chain of command. Working alongside the railroad could be a chain gang. Working inside a military command structure could be a chain gang. A gang doesn't necessarily have to have negative connotations. In fact, it shouldn't. A gang should be synonymous with club. A gang should be the same thing as a club. In fact, if you do your studies, if you do your homework, you'll know that there's the Peanuts gang. Charlie Brown by Schultz. Was Charlie Brown and Linus and all these different characters, Tweety Bird, Snoopy, were they bad people? Were they malicious? No, they were comic characters. The Peanuts gang. Because gang hasn't always had negative connotations. These original organizations, Crips, Bloods, Growth and Development, Vice Lords, they started out with good intentions. They all had good intentions. They all wanted to clean up the neighborhoods that were overrun with crime and corruption. That's what we need to go back to. You don't have to be criminally active because you're a member of one of these so-called gangs or organizations. In fact, some of the aforementioned some of the members don't even refer to the larger organizations as gangs. They refer to themselves as organizations. Regardless, they're still viable organizations that can be turned around for the better of humanity, society. You know that's true. I know that's true. In fact, go on the internet, for example, and do some research on gangster disciples. You will see that there are older members of the organization telling kids on the internet who claim gangster disciple that term at the top of that organization isn't even used any longer. Gangster disciple isn't used in the upper echelons of growth and development. The original individuals who created that grassroots organization in Chicago, they don't use gangster disciple any longer. They use growth and development. Yet there are these young members who are criminally active and they're claiming to be part of something that no longer exists. And there are millions of them who don't heed the word. They don't take heed to what the people who founded, the founders of their organization are saying. The founders are the people who started it. They have the most say in what goes on in the organization. They created it. They're the architects. And they say, look, we as the designers of this infrastructure say it's no longer referred to as gangster disciple. It's referred to as growth and development. If you are someone who claims this organization and you are claiming gangster disciple, you are in violation of this organization. This is growth and development. That's what they say. I'm not a member of growth and development. I'm not a member of GD. I'm not a gangster disciple. However, as an observer, a casual observer, as a scholar, I've followed this evolution over time, and I've read the history and I've studied it, and I know members of growth and development. I also know people who unfortunately claim that they're gangsters and that they're disciples. And they're criminally active for absolutely no reason. They don't have to be criminally active. They'd make more money if they were working legitimate jobs. The same is true of Bloods organizations. I come from a Blood neighborhood. I'm from the West Coast of the United States. I know OGs who aren't criminally active. They don't have anything to do with crime. They work. They're family men. They come from Blood neighborhoods. They fly red. They fly colors from Blood sets, whether it's Lime Hood, Treetop, Fruit Town, Pyrus, Ruse, Damus, Bounty Hunters, East Sides, West Sides, East Side Pyrus, Tacoma, Everett, Seattle, Bremerton, wherever. The Northwest, LA, New York, it doesn't matter. And here's another thing. There are these people going around talking about UBN on the West Coast, or rather UBN on the East Coast, isn't a real blood gang. That's a real blood gang. UBN isn't just on the East Coast. UBN is also on the West Coast, and UBN was on the West Coast years before Gangland TV claims that UBN came into existence. You see, these organizations are also fraternities. They're fraternities and sororities. It's the same thing as being a member of a Greek fraternity. There are secrets within these organizations that you're not going to know about unless you're a member of these organizations. It's like the Vice Lord oath, or the oath that any of these different groups take. They're not going to tell you unless you know how to gain that intelligence, unless you can get that respect or you can find the information on your own. It's the same as Masonry. It's the same with any secret fraternity, sorority organization. You hear things in the media, but if you're not a member of these organizations, if you don't have the real stripes, if you weren't indoctrinated, in other words, if you weren't recruited into these organizations, you have no idea unless you do the research. Yes, there are people who claim that UBN was wayward in some respects because some of the individuals were slashing people in public with razor blades and knives and daggers and whatnot. That's not everybody in UBN. UBN was on the West Coast long before Gangland claims that it was in New York, so obviously somebody's got it wrong. You heard OG Mac started it in prison to fight the Latin Kings. Okay, well maybe OG Mac knew something that you don't know. Maybe he knew something and you think that it was started in prison. How do you know that UBN didn't start on the West Coast? You don't know that. You have no idea. You don't know everybody who OG Mac knew or knows. If you think you have this knowledge, intelligence, then tell me, how is it possible that UBN is on FBI, police, law enforcement, government documented record of and as having existed on the West Coast years before, a decade before it's claimed that it came into existence by Gangland TV? A lot of the members on the East Coast don't even know the true history of UBN. OG Mac was integral. He was an integral part of its beginnings on the East Coast, but don't necessarily believe everything you hear in the media and everything you hear in society. That's known as an urban legend. OG Mac might have known someone from the West Coast. Why wouldn't he? I mean, it's New York. People come and go from all around the world. Maybe someone put OG Mac up on some secret knowledge and said, hey, look, bruh, here goes some game. Whoop-de-whoop-de-whoop, yada, yada, yada. You know what I'm saying? Okay, so now it's in the prison system. You really honestly think, mathematically speaking, that OG Mac came up with UBN on his own accord? It doesn't make any sense. It doesn't add up. Then how do you explain UBN on the West Coast? UBN's bigger than you think. UBN is a large organization. It's the same organization on the West Coast. So when you run your mouth, those of you who do, and you talk about, well, UBN, you know, who sanctioned it on the West Coast? That's none of your business. You don't have a need to know. It's the same as the military and the intelligence community. Gangs have intelligence. Do your history, you'll find out. Conservative Vice Lords, CVL, they're the first street organization in the United States of America that ever had U.S. government contracts. That's right. Conservative Vice Lords in Chicago, CVL, had U.S. government contracts. The government funded CVL, gave CVL money for street operations. You don't know that unless you know your history of CVL. So you don't know about Bloods like you think you really do. Bloods have intelligence networks. Bloods are an intelligence network at the highest echelons. Bloods is a term that was used by African American soldiers in the Vietnam War. So you really need to go back and do your history and figure out how these organizations materialized into this universe of ours and where they came from. Talking all the stuff on the internet, you newbies, you youngsters, you really don't know the secrets of these different organizations and their different alliances and whatnot. You need to check it out. You need to get your facts straight. I'm from a blood hood. I'm from a blood neighborhood. I'm from the West Coast. I am an OG. So you can't tell me shit. The analogy that I use with regard to the American icons from Schultz, i.e. the Peanuts gang, is just one small example of how individuals can misconstrue certain information data, and then it becomes this larger set of data, which then begets an urban legend. That's my point in this entire video, and also the connection between East Coast UBN and West Coast UBN, much of which remains a secret to this day to so-called scholars and pseudo-intellectuals, even members of the larger organization of Bloods. You don't have to be committing crimes. You don't have to commit crimes to be a member of a Bloods organization, a so-called Bloods gang. Go to school. Recreate your communities in the 21st century. Create modern 21st century futuristic society. That's what grassroots mobilization is all about. Get rid of the crime in your neighborhoods. Stop the flow of drugs into your neighborhoods. Stop the racketeering, the rackets from A to Z. You don't need that stuff in your neighborhood. That's why Bloods existed in the first place, was to combat those types of evils, those types of immoral activities. Same with the CVLs, Conservative Vice Lords. We band together to get rid of this kind of stuff. That's what we are going back to.